We, three of us had just a quiet time wrapping him appropriately, and we thought this would be a nice image to be able to give. It's what I gave to Leilani and Billy Joe when I told them we had found him in the landfill.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Brad Snyder. I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
And how do you spell Snyder?
Snider.
How long have you been an FBI special agent?
Approximately 18 years.
FBI Special Agent Brad Snyder testified about multiple interviews he conducted throughout the police investigation. During direct examination by Chatham County Special Assistant District Attorney and Assistant U.S. Attorney Tim Dean about Leilani Simon's demeanor during interviews, Snyder testified that it was inconsistent, adding that Leilani Simon's responses were emotionally shallow. Snyder went into detail about his October 12th interview with Leilani Simon, saying her story changed 3 times, including an admission of significant drug use on the night and morning of Quinton's reported disappearance, adding that she threw away a garbage bag full of shrimp pasta, agreeing that she did not pick up Orajel from a friend, despite previous assurances that the event had taken place.
Did her demeanor, tone, and volume, was it consistent throughout these October 5th interviews, or did it change at times?
I'll allow that.
Her demeanor was inconsistent, erratic. The responses I would characterize as shallow, emotional responses, and that on a dime, there would be crying with no tears, and then moments later, without really any transition, it would go to a normal conversation.
Now, what would cause, what sort of lines of questioning would cause the crying with no tears and the increase in volume and rapidity of speech and things like that? When would that happen?
Anytime the pattern of questioning, pressed her on a particular issue she was uncomfortable with, that's when the defendant would become erratic and behave in that manner.
Now, I'd like to ask you just a couple questions about her story on day 1 on October 5th. Did you all talk to her about a trip that she had made away from the house sometime shortly after 1 a.m.?
We did.
And what was her story at that time as to what she was doing there?
At that particular time, it was to pay a front for Danny, her boyfriend at the time.
I'm asking you about the trip after 1 a.m., not the earlier one in the night. What was her story as to the trip after 1 a.m.?
After 1 a.m., that was to go see an individual by the name of Melissa Bray to get Orajel. She had just recently had her wisdom tooth pulled the day prior, and her story was she departed the residence at 1 a.m. to go get Orajel from Melissa Bray.
What was she calling Melissa Bray at that time on day 1?
That was Misty, as she referred to Melissa Bray, Misty.
And can you describe the composition of the local team? Like, who was involved in this thing?
Sure. So the Chatham County Police Department had 2 primary investigators, Detective Lemons and a Detective Noble. They were supported by a cadre of additional investigators, supervisors. Our FBI team consisted of myself, Special Agent Solomon, Special Agent Burns, and we were also supported by a cadre of FBI agents from Augusta, from Brunswick, and then at that point in time, once we had our local investigative teams together, we started reaching out to other resources that both the FBI and Chatham County had at their disposal.
Can you describe some of this outreach to other units and resources that come to mind?
Sure. So the FBI has a team referred to as the CARD team, or the Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. So once we realized the situation at hand, we immediately sought the assistance of our Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. We contacted our behavior analysis unit at FBI headquarters in Quantico, commonly referred to as FBI profilers. They provided a substantial amount of subject matter expertise. We also contacted FBI CAST, the cellular analysis survey team. They were able to take a very detailed look at the telephones associated with this investigation. We also reached out to our CART team, computer analysis response team, and they were able to do a lot of work with a particular infotainment system within the vehicle driven by the defendant.
What about the DFAU? Did y'all use them for anything?
We did digital forensics analysis unit. They did a lot of video, audio enhancement, specifically, video enhancement, and then audio enhancement as it relates to some of the interviews to clarify various points where the audio wasn't as clear as we wanted it to be.
Can you think of any resources y'all didn't use in this case?
Truly, no. In this investigation, we utilized resources in a very finite amount of time. Really, what it spanned, probably 8 days. And normally, the investigative techniques we employed in 8 days is something that we would use across a 6-month to a year-long investigation. Just to give merit to the monumental effort, that both the FBI and the Chatham County Police Department undertook in very short order.
Let me ask you about the October 8th interview. Okay, we've heard testimony about an interview on October 8th at the FBI office in Savannah with an interviewer from Quantico named Bridget Brock. Okay, were you present for that interview?
I wasn't present for the interview, but I observed the interview in a remote location within the office.
Okay, you're watching it on like a live feed or something like that?
That's correct.
Okay. And let me ask you this about, because I don't know that I've asked anybody else this. The location in which that interview was conducted, is that in Chatham County?
It is. It's at the FBI office off Chatham Parkway here in Savannah.
Okay. And the October 5 interviews at Chatham County Police Headquarters, were those in Chatham County as well?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. Is it fair to say that in the lead up to this October 8th interview with Bridget Brock, that the two most significant investigative findings were your interview with
leading question.
prior to that October 8th interview, had you interviewed Melissa Bray?
I had.
Can you tell me first about the process of locating her in the first place?
We first learned of Melissa Bray through an interview of the defendant. The defendant provided us information that she previously worked with Melissa Bray at a restaurant located off of Highway 17 and Chatham Parkway here in Savannah. And I went to the restaurant, approached Miss Bray during working hours, and asked Miss Bray if she had some time after she was off work for the day to speak with me. She advised that she did. She would be more than happy to speak with the FBI. Arrived at her residence at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon of October the 6th.
And what were you asking her? What were you looking for from her?
The main thing that we were trying to seek from Miss Melissa Bray was whether or not she had any recent interaction with the defendant.
And what did she tell you?
Miss Bray provided that she hadn't had any recent interaction. However, she provided text messages and, that the last time she had contact face-to-face with the defendant was July the 5th. She received a text message or a phone call. Actually, I believe it was a text message from the defendant. The defendant said she had run out of gas, needed a gas can. Miss Melissa Bray, as well as her husband, supported the defendant in getting that gas. And then after that, there were a series of text messages on July 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and I believe the 13th, where Miss Bray was trying to get the gas can back from the defendant. I observed the text messages myself. There was never a response. The gas can was not returned. So really, from July the 5th, there had been no contact whatsoever, according to Ms. Bray, between Mrs. Bray and the defendant.
Now, so that was done before the October 8th interview with Bridget Brock.
That's correct, yes, sir.
And prior to that October 8th interview with Bridget Brock, had the investigative team obtained some important video footage?
We had.
And just broadly tell us what that was.
That was CCTV footage obtained from the Azalea Gardens trailer park.
And in this October 8th interview with Bridget Brock, did the defendant stick to the Misty story?
Absolutely.
Now, moving forward from this, that night, the night of the 8th, this is when the hotel monitoring operation was conducted, right?
That's correct.
Now, were you involved in setting that up, or at least discussing it with Daniel Youngkin?
I was.
And when had that discussion taken place?
On October the 7th.
Okay. Can you describe, approaching Danny and bringing this up, and who else might have been there for this conversation?
That was an interview conversation that we had with Danny Youngkin with Agent Savannah Solomon on October the 7th at our office. We disclosed to Mr. Youngkin, to Danny at the time, the facts that we had learned at that point in the investigation. We disclosed to Mr. Youngkin the...
Objection, Your Honor. It's a narrative from the witness again. I don't think that's a question that Mr. Dean asked him.
I asked him to describe the circumstances of approaching Mr. Youngkin about this operation, proposing this operation. This is a totally responsive answer.
It's a narrative, Judge. I mean, if he has a direct question, he needs to ask a direct question, not an open-ended one to allow the witness to say whatever he wants.
I don't think in this case it was. I'm going to overrule the objection.
You can continue.
So again, we were able to disclose to Mr. Youngkin the facts of the investigation that we had obtained at that point. And two of those important facts at that point were the surveillance footage that we obtained from Azalea Trailer Park, as well as the interview that I had conducted the previous day of Ms. Melissa Bray, in which she had no recollection whatsoever of having any interaction with the defendant regarding the Orangeville story.
And did you ask him if he would agree to this filming and audio monitoring in the hotel room?
We did.
How did he react to that?
He was on board 100%. Whatever he needed to do, he was glad to do it.
Did he seem nervous? Did he stutter? Anything like that?
No, sir.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for opinion again.
It's based on what his observations were. I'm going to allow it.
The answer to that question was no.
That's correct.
Let me ask you about October 12th. So this would be 4 days after the October 8th interview with Bridget Brock, right?
Yes,
In which she had insisted that the Orangeville story was true, right?
correct.
Now, this October 12th interview, where was it conducted?
That interview was also conducted at our FBI office here in Savannah off Chatham Parkway.
In Chatham County?
Correct.
And who was involved in this interview?
That was myself and Special Agent Solomon, also with the FBI.
What type of room did it take place in?
A large conference room, approximately half the size of this room that we're in today.
And was it recorded?
It was.
Audio and video?
That's correct, yes, sir.
In this interview, did the defendant's story change?
Yes, sir, it did.
And how did it change? In what parts of it changed, I guess?
Really, three main points came out of this interview. The first change was the admission of significant drug use on the night of the 4th and the morning of the 5th. The interaction with Miss Melissa Bray in the Orgel story. That was a significant change, where over the course of the interview, she disclosed, agreed that that actually did not happen. And then we obtained significant information as it relates to her purpose in the trailer park that night and throwing away trash.
What did she say about, I mean, we're going to watch it, but kind of overview, what did she say about throwing away trash in the trailer park?
Initially, the whole purpose of going to the Azalea Trailer Park was to get the Orgel from Miss Melissa Bray. But once we confronted her that I myself had interviewed Miss Melissa Bray, and Melissa Bray was not able to corroborate that story, she told us that she also had trash in the back of the vehicle that was placed in there the night prior, or the day prior, approximately 4:30 on the 4th. And the trash, being that Miss Melissa Bray was not there, the trash was smelling up the car. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:15 in the morning, when she drove by Miss Melissa Bray's house, she wasn't there. She took that opportunity to throw the trash that was in the back of the Dodge Journey into the dumpsters at Azalea Trailer Park.
Now, in either of those, on either of those days, October 5th and October 8th, had she said anything about throwing trash away at Azalea on that trip?
Never.
So as of October 12th, is it fair to say that this was new information from the defendant?
It was.
Did she talk to you about how much the trash weighed? Well, let me ask you this. First of all, what did she identify the trash as being specifically, to the extent you remember?
She identified it as being shrimp pasta. That was a meal that they had thrown away from a day or two prior.
Was she able to give you details on the estimated weight of the trash and the specific physical mechanics of throwing it away?
She was.
What did she say about those two things, the weight and how she did it?
When we were questioning her about that, this was towards the end of the interview, we asked how she threw the trash away. She described getting out of her vehicle on the driver's side, walking along the driver's side to the rear of the vehicle, opening the back hatch of the Dodge Journey, and then pulling the single trash bag out. She was asked how she pulled that bag out. Verbally, she said, "I pulled it out with one hand," but as she was demonstrating, how she pulled the bag out, she demonstrated using two hands to throw the trash bag into the dumpster. She also described before she went to throw the bag in the dumpster, she opened the bag and described smelling the bag before she threw the bag into the dumpster.
Was she able to tell you if this really was just a bag of old food, why she would have felt the need to look inside the bag one last time before throwing it away?
We asked her that multiple times in the interview, describing, is it normal for a person to, knowing that the vehicle was had an odor to it, is it normal for a person to smell the trash before they throw it in the dumpster? And the defendant really didn't have an explanation for that other than she was just smelling the trash before she threw it away.
At some point in this interview, did she say anything about taking responsibility?
She did.
What do you remember her saying about that?
We'll see it in the interview, but I can't recall verbatim, but it was something to the effect of, if I did this, I'll take responsibility. Verbatim, I can't recall exactly what she said.
Did she ultimately tell you that the Percocet she had obtained that night was from Craig?
She did, that's correct, yes sir.
And this was something that she had identified as red in earlier interviews?
That's correct.
but in this interview, she confirmed that Craig and Red are the same person.
Yes, sir.
And in this interview, she admitted that she had met him at Arkwright Road, not Flacco's Tacos.
That's correct.
What did she ultimately say eventually about whether she had met Misty that night?
Ultimately, as a result of the interview, she provided that she hadn't indeed met Missy that night.
And that was only after first telling you in here that I did meet Missy 100%.
On multiple occasions, yes.
What did she ultimately say about whether she had gotten Oragel that night and where she had gotten it?
She couldn't get off the fact that she did get Oragel. So after we came to the determination that she didn't get Oragel from Mitzi, she continued to state that she had the Oragel, found it in her car when she got back to the house.
What did she say to you about the frequency of her cocaine use around this time frame? Not just that night, but just the frequency of her cocaine use generally?
Yes, sir. So that she was a daily cocaine user and she was using cocaine, Percocet, marijuana on October the 4th, as well as the early morning hours of October the 5th.
And specifically, did she tell you that she had been using cocaine throughout the night that night?
She did, yes, sir.
Did she tell you that after she had gotten home from the dumpsters, she had hit another line or two?
She did.
And did she tell you that she was all types of fucked up that night?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
At one point, did she say that I was so messed up on drugs?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And did she tell you that if I was so fucked up that I did something, I'd take responsibility?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. Now, were you involved in the coordination and oversight of the landfill search?
Yes, sir, I was.
Now, can you tell us generally, in relation to the search area pointed out by the landfill manager and then later outlined by Team Adam, where were Quinton's remains ultimately found in relation to that box or so?
They were found in the lower left portion of the box that Team Adam had identified for the search team as the area to search.
Now, did you all keep an open mind during this investigation and take seriously the idea of Paul and Danny as suspects?
We did.
Why did the investigation ultimately focus in on the defendant?
Ultimately, there were 3 individuals in that house, 3 adults in that house. And of those 3 adults, there was only one that continued to lie to us throughout the course of the investigation.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Hi, my name is Special Agent Savannah Solomon with the FBI.
And what office are you with?
I'm with the Savannah Resident Agency out of the Atlanta Division
How long have you been an FBI special agent?
for 6 years.
Do you work closely with Brad Snyder?
I do.
FBI Special Agent Savannah Solomon then testified that when she interviewed Youngkin, he was forthcoming and defensive of Leilani at first. Ultimately, however, Youngkin agreed and confirmed through testimony that he and Leilani Simon stayed in a hotel room on October 8, 2022, which was bugged with audio and video surveillance equipment by the FBI. Solomon then testified that Leilani Simon texted Solomon that she was no longer lying for Youngkin anymore, and that he was the last one to leave the 535 Buckhalter Roadhouse, where Quinton was last seen. But Leilani Simon later admitted to Solomon in another interview that her text was a theory. Solomon said that she never told Leilani Simon that Quinton was dead, but told her that he would be found in the landfill. Leilani Simon did not seem shocked, the special agent testified. A direct contract to Billie Joe Howell, Quinton's grandmother and Leilani's mother, who showed anguish when told her grandson was dead and reacted in horror and disbelief when told Quinton would be found in the landfill.
I want to ask you about your involvement in the case. Did you become involved on day 1 on October 5th?
I did.
And did you go to Chatham County Police Department headquarters and participate in an interview or some interviews?
I did.
What detective were you paired up with?
Detective Nobles.
And whom did you interview that day of the three that we've been talking about?
Daniel Youngkin.
Okay. Can you tell us about his level of cooperation in the day one interviews?
He was forthcoming in regards to items about Quinton. He minimized on drug use and was defensive of Leilani.
What do you mean by defensive about Leilani?
He believed anything that she had told him that day and was told us he believed it was true.
At some point that day, did you go to the residence at 535 Buckhalter Road?
I did.
And where did that fit into your involvement at Chatham County Police Department headquarters that you've been talking about?
After my first interview of Danny, the group kind of reconvened on what had happened in the different interviews, and because there was no need to continue talking at that point, Taylor, Burns, and I drove to the Buckhalter Road residence to assist with the search.
Now, were you present when Chatham County Police Department forensics were photographing the residents and various outbuildings and things?
I was. As you can see, it's just kind of thrown in a garage with a bunch of tools and covered in cobwebs, and looks like it's been there for a minute.
Okay. Was this significant to you at the time?
It was.
And why is that?
Because Leilani had reported Quinton missing with his favorite toy, a Mickey Mouse toy.
And is that something that anybody else mentioned to you, him having a favorite toy, Mickey Mouse toy?
No. No one knew about a Mickey Mouse toy when I asked them about it. She needed a smoke break outside, so I walked out with her.
At some point during that interaction, or maybe it was another one that day, did she say something to you about getting a tattoo?
Yes, she showed me her Hawaiian symbol tattoo about the waves going up and down, and said that she wanted to get a tattoo in honor of Quinton along with it.
And this was on October 5.
It was.
She was talking about getting a tattoo of him.
In honor of him, yes.
Okay. At this point in time, was she still kind of representing the story that Quinton had been abducted?
Yes.
Was anybody yet talking about Quinton being dead?
We suspected it within the investigative team, but it had not been discussed outside of the investigative team.
I'd like to ask you a couple questions about your involvement over the following days. Did you follow up in reference to Danny's workplace?
I did.
Can you describe that follow-up, please? Without talking about what anybody said to you, but what did y'all go out there to do?
Detective Noble and I met with Danny and Leilani's supervisor and spoke with him. He put us in touch with the corporate security who had video footage from the plant or the warehouse.
And did they turn footage around to you?
They did.
Why was it important to you to go out and talk to Danny's boss and to get video footage of what he looked like when he was leaving work?
We are doing our best to corroborate every single statement that had been made to us in the previous 24 hours, to include how and when Danny learned that Quinton was missing.
How he reacted?
Correct.
I'd like to draw your attention to the defendant's October 8th interview with Bridget Rock at the FBI office in Savannah.
Okay.
That evening, October 8th, that was the hotel surveillance operation.
It was.
And how many nights did that go on for? Was it one, two?
One night.
Okay, just the one night. Were you involved in proposing that idea to Daniel Youngkin?
Yes,
And that would have been like the day before on the 7th?
it was.
Okay. Tell us about his reaction to that proposal.
The day he came to us, he was pretty broken in a lot of ways. He was still trying to figure out what he believed had happened. He was worried about his child, and was beginning to have conflicts between believing Leilani less, but also his loyalties to her, and was working through that. So when we got to the point of talking through a lot of his concerns there, he was willing, and actually was the one who said, are you going to want to wire up the hotel room? And we said, only with your permission. We wouldn't do that without your permission. So
Are you saying he, like, guessed? I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
we
At
had
that
it.
point, were y'all planning to ask him that?
We were planning to ask him that, so we were going down that road, but he was the first one to address wiring the room.
Okay, so he's the one who brought it up even though you were about to? Is that
Right.
what you're saying? Okay. Can you discuss briefly just the logistics of setting this up and then the monitoring plan that was put into place?
We had 2 adjacent hotel rooms at a nearby hotel, and our tech team worked their magic and used their special techniques to put audio and video monitoring equipment in the one room, and the live monitoring occurred right next door. So as we were in the next door room, we were observing via video feed and audio what was happening right next to us.
Can you, were you involved in monitoring it yourself?
I was there the entire time that they were awake.
Okay.
Yes,
And so you had the opportunity to see all their interactions?
I did.
Was he asking her about the truthfulness or lack thereof of the Origel story?
Repeatedly.
And what was she saying in response to those inquiries?
She doubled down on the Origel and brought up her alibi with Miss D.
Was there a point, what was the main point of bringing her in? Were you bringing her in to notify her of anything in particular that day on October 12th?
That was the day that we provided the death notifications and notifications of landfill search to the family members.
And at what point in that day or that interview did you notify the defendant of that?
We never actually said that Quinton was dead. With her, it was understood. So maybe halfway through the time, we made it clear, but we never said the word dead.
At some point during that interview, did you tell her something to the effect of, we're about to start searching that landfill and we're 98% sure we're going to find Quinton in it?
I was very confident we were going to find Quinton in the landfill when I spoke to her, yes.
Did you tell her that?
Yes.
How did she react to that?
She said he wasn't in the bag, but it was hard to characterize. It wasn't shock, which is the most surprising thing of it.
Did you inform her mother, the defendant's mother, Billy Joe Howell, of the same thing at some point that day?
About an hour later,
Yeah, was that after the defendant's interview had concluded?
it was.
Where were you when you informed the defendant's mother of that?
Brad and our victim specialist and I went to the Buckwalter Road residence and informed her in her living room.
And how did she react when you told her that?
I told her in order. I told her I was going to tell her 3 things, and when she was done processing one, we would move to the next. So the first thing I told her was that Quinton had died. And she showed anguish. When she was ready to hear the next thing, I told her that we were going to find him in the landfill and that we would be announcing that search was commencing. And she pulled back from me and she said, "My baby is in the trash."
What was your typical day like between October 12th and October 24th? What did that look like for you?
Landfill operations commenced a few days following the 12th. So as those were going, I would get to the landfill for the sunrise brief to try to represent the case team and give some sort of morale or update motivation. I would go back to the office and review Danny's calls and texts from the previous day and attend to any investigative or administrative work that needed to be done. We were continuously following leads from the public and additional investigative avenues to make sure that we didn't close any doors too soon. And then Taylor and I would drive to the landfill to meet the team as they were wrapping up ahead of their lunch break so we could check boots, give updates, check on the status of everything, and kind of go in with everybody, and then back to the office.
Were you involved in the coordination and supervision of the landfill search throughout?
Yes, I staffed all of the volunteers from Savannah and Brunswick, and as I mentioned earlier, I was present at least twice a day. If I didn't have administrative or investigative work on a given day, I was dressed out searching.
Now, we've heard some testimony to this point that suspected human remains were found there that day after some period of unsuccessful searching. Were you there at the outset of that discovery that day?
I was at the United States Attorney's Office facilitating an interview, and Brad called me and said that a skull had been found, and I immediately left the meeting at the U.S. Attorney's Office and quickly got to the landfill and was there for the rest of the day and the additional findings.
Can you describe what was going on when you got there? What was the scene like at the landfill?
Somber, but everyone was looking very, very carefully. We knew we were looking for small pieces of a small child, and fortunately the skull is more recognizable, and so we had believed that if we found one piece, all other pieces that we would find would be within 6 feet of the trash as it was compacted. So we knew that that was our day when we found him at the beginning of the day. And so we were, as you can imagine, there are a lot of bones in a landfill. And so we had to sort through chicken wings and T-bones and all of that to find what would appear to be human and separate those out. And that was throughout the day.
How far apart on the search day were pieces of Quinton found from one another?
That's kind of hard to describe because he was strewn, because he'd been strewn when he was compacted into his place of rest at the time, and then the bulldozer dug up chunks and laid out the deck, and then we spread them out. And so he was found across 2 or 3 decks, and the decks were, half a football field. So many searchers found different pieces of him, yes. When we found this and brought it to the tent, we weren't sure when we saw it from here. What I know now and can see is it is a severed foot, cut from the ankle, looking from the inside of the ankle down.
Can you see the ankle bones in this image, just to orient us?
Yes, to orient, this is the ankle bone where it was cut, and then you see almost a left toenail, and you can start seeing the shape of the foot from there.
Turning to the next page in the binder.
Yes.
What is this?
That is the same foot flipped over so you can clearly see the skin of the foot. This is his heel. And then you shake down to the tips of the toe bones through the 5. We had a huge poster of Quinton after bath time, dressed and barefooted, on the top of the landfill to remember what we were looking for. And so we had been looking at his foot and his forehead for 5 weeks, and that is what we found. That is his foot.
And finally, the fourth image in the binder.
Yes.
What do you believe this to be?
I believe it is a swath of skin going from the length of a body, of a toddler's body. So the shoulders come through the back and then down one leg. This was a piece that Officer Zerke passed to Kim Johnson, who passed to me as we carried out with tongs, because at the time it was hard to recognize, but we knew it stood out from everything else we had seen in the landfill.
Who took them from the FBI lab in Savannah to anywhere else?
So we arranged for private transport for Quinton. No one felt comfortable FedExing him or putting him on any other way. So I wrapped the box and drove him to Macon, where I met another agent who is on our fly team. And I handed Quinton to Agent Keys, who took him to Atlanta and kept him secure until the next day, where he flew him on an FBI aircraft to meet the lab in Virginia.
Is that how Quinton got to the FBI lab at Quantico?
It is.
Do you see in front of you two pictures stapled together and marked as States Exhibit? I think it should be 93, is that right?
92?
92, okay. Do you recognize those images?
I do.
What do those images show?
That is how I wrapped Quinton's box to transport him. And so the first image was what I could offer to the family when I gave a second death notification. And the second image is how he rode with me in our truck.
Do these images fairly and accurately depict the events that you've been talking about?
Yes, I took the second picture myself.
I'd offer this in a States Exhibit 92, John.
No objection.
Admit it without objection.
Publish the first image here. Can you describe to us what we're seeing here?
We had Scott Schumann and Jeff Allen were at the office with me for me to retrieve Quinton and to borrow Scott's work truck to drive him. We, three of us, had just a quiet time wrapping him appropriately, and we thought this would be a nice image to be able to give. It's what I gave to Leilani and Billy Joe when I told them we had found him in the landfill. But he is in that box. He's in the bags in the box. And we wrapped it in a black cloth and then the flag.
Moving on to the second image.
That is Quinton in my back seat, how he rode with me on the way to Macon.